And we are live on the Static Planet. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever, wherever, however it is for you. My name is Michael John, of course, of Michael John's Paranormal Ghost Stories. Find that on all Amazon outlets. Also, star of CTV's The Traders Canada Season 2 happening right now, Monday nights at 10 p.m. That is my co-ghost host, actually, Dale High Spirits Quigley, a man of many faces, a man of many facades. Always there by my side, of course, like right now, right here. Since grade 5. Oh, my God. How crazy is that? Yeah.
Over there.
Where do you point? I don't know. I can never tell with these stupid cameras. But what a show we got today. I'm excited. We met this gentleman at the UFO Contact Convention. He was a guest speaker there this year. A very interesting individual. What was interesting about him, and we're going to bring it up, we're going to show it during the course of the interview tonight. While I was up speaking, he was in the back, unbeknownst to me, unbeknownst to you, Dale, as well. He was in the back scribbling away on a piece of paper. And that seems to be, that's happening more than not, because it happens somewhere else too, and we can talk about that during the show with Jeff, actually, on, in relation to our situation with Jeff, but also it's you know what I'm talking about, right? It's not the first time now where someone gets something in their head and all of a sudden they're writing stuff and they're like, hey, does this mean anything? What do you think about that? I don't know why I was writing this. I don't know why I was drawing this.
Yeah, no, and I mean that's the amazing part about being in a community and being live at one of these events. Like I said, it was great. You were up there talking. You were just had the whole audience captivated. It was a great.
I thought they were sleeping, but that's okay.
No, I don't think anybody was sleeping because they were hanging on to every word that you were talking about there. But yeah, no, like I said, it's amazing what people come to people. And like I said, this wasn't the first time this happened. We're going to talk about that more a little bit later on. But yeah, I mean, Michael John over there being all over the place every Monday night, 10 p.m. CTV Canada. Like I said, killing it on Traders Season 2, man. Like I said, as the series goes on, it's getting more and more interesting. So, like
my partners are those two girls, Kira and Netta. If you're keeping up, boy, I pissed some people off, boy, going into business for myself, but that's what it's about. Stay tuned to see what happens.
Absolutely,
nothing yet, as they say.
But yeah, so our guest tonight, like I said, I've been watching him for quite a while, doing a show with our good friend, the lovely Miss Andrea Perron, who we love so much. Like I said, it's just watching this guy every Friday night with Andrea, and the two of them together are truly amazing. They have one amazing show. We're going to talk about that too right now. I just want to say a little bit of highs on the side right now. We got our good friends of Mystical Awakenings, Devin, RJ DeRoos. Love you guys. Glad to see you.
I signed for the kids.
And Mama of course, my fafavorite name on here is Dark Putin. I love that because I love Putin, and it is Michael Brown. Yes. So that is. I see that and I just smile, and now it makes me hungry, by the way. And hello, Liz. It's good to see you. Everybody, thank you for joining us right now. But should we bring them on or what's going on?
I don't know. Do you want to keep talking or?
No, I want to talk to this guy so bad. Ever since we met him at the UFO Contact Convention, I'll tell you, I've been so hyper. when I got to finally meet him, like I said, I've been watching him for a while. So yeah, let's just get him out here. Everybody, TPV Nation, welcome the one, the only, Mr. Jeff Turner.
Hey guys.
How you doing today, Jeff? Thank you so much for being here with us. It's such a great honor. Like I said, we got to meet you this year. It was great to sit down, and I mean, just meeting you after about 5 minutes, it felt like I've been talking to you forever. You probably go, "Wow, has this guy ever shut up?"
No. I felt the same way.
Yeah, there's definitely a connection. Like I was mentioning before we brought you on a few seconds ago there. I was up there talking. You were drawing. You're just sketching. Just some kid. You're like, some kid of mine I'm drawing. Yada yada. What do you think? You know what? I don't know. Maybe it's something for you guys. And we're all. It was like a melding. It was like all of a sudden just what's the word I'm looking for? Without being too grandiose. We just bonded right then and there.
Yeah.
It was a confirmation of a bigger connection, you know. And I'll show that in a bit. I don't want to, you know, too much thunder with the lightning yet, you know. But so I mean, you've done so many things in your life. What a journey for you, you know, Jeff. A former pastor. Well, let's start there. I mean, I'm looking. I got your bio off to my just there. I can sneak a peek, but because there's so much about you, man. My memory's good but short. Not unlike myself, 5'4" all my life. Right out of my mom, I've been this height, so I've never grown. But so you're a former pastor. What was that like? First off, what was there a calling? What made you say I want to do this?
Yeah, you know, I think there was a calling, and you know, I grew up in a Christian home. I wouldn't say fundamentalist because that brings certain things to mind that I don't mean to infer about my upbringing, you know, but still, for most people, it would probably be considered fundamentalist, but my parents are fantastic and I never felt oppressed or anything by my religious upbringing. I oppressed myself using religion, but my upbringing itself was fantastic. And I had great parents and great examples. When you think of the word godly, what people without all the weirdness, that's my parents. They're the greatest people you'd ever meet. I would, if I could have fashioned them myself, I would have fashioned exactly them in every lifetime.
Wow.
And so I had a great upbringing and I had a fantastic example. My dad was a pastor. I grew up in a Christian home, a pastor's home my whole life. And, I just saw the example of my father. I saw how he treated my mother. I saw how he treated us as kids. And I loved him for that. So there was certainly, I don't know, probably some kind of just attraction to that because I saw, my hero who I wanted to emulate. But at the same time, there came a point where I had my own sort of genuine experience of the divine. However, I might interpret that now, it might be different than how I interpreted it then. But I began to have, real genuine experiences of a spiritual nature. And, at the time, this was kind of the only expression of spirituality or religion I had. And so kind of naturally, I followed the course that was sort of prepackaged within that system. And, it lent itself to kind of being a pastor and going into ministry. And so I did that. My wife and I got married when I was 2 weeks 19 and moved to Pensacola, Florida. 2 weeks later, I went to Bible college seminary down there. A few years later, we moved back and we became pastors. And we did that for 12 years in the same location. It was wonderful. It was trying. It was exhausting. It was a lot of things. But it gave me it gave me the opportunity to pursue spirituality in a way that, a lot of people just aren't fortunate enough to be able to do, you know what I mean? Because right out of the gate, right out of college, right out of high school, right out of college, I really kind of like being a pastor is work. You definitely work, there's a kind of 9-to-5 aspect to it. But it's not the same 9-to-5 aspect that I have embraced now post pastoring in order to keep the lights on. It's very different. I was able to really focus solely on the thing that I was passionate about. And it's not really something a lot of people get the opportunity to do. And so part of it was I really got to tease out the full implications. I won't say the full, but I got to tease out more fully the implications of my belief system than I would have otherwise, and that most people probably get the opportunity to do. And so that allowed me the opportunity to see through things I might not have otherwise saw through, see differently things I might not have ever come to see differently, and ultimately take a path that I probably would not have taken, you know? So.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, so
Good answer.
well, when so upbringing, and your father was a pastor, so obviously he was proud that you followed in his footsteps.
Yeah.
Now, jumping forward a little bit, what was it like when you told him that you were kind of switching gears a little bit? How was that? I mean, it's
Yeah.
like, do you like pass the mashed potatoes? By the way, I'm no longer a pastor. I'm going to go off and be something different.
Yeah, that's a great question. And that was hard. That was hard because, you know, I think instinctively, I won't say everybody, but I impress the face of my father onto my conception of God. And so in some ways you're trying to please both at the same time. You know what I mean? At least for me, there's an aspect of that, especially because he represented that to me in a lot of ways. And so I had kind of made my peace with the God side of things. Like I was ready to kind of let this go, take a new path. But that side of things was actually more difficult because, you know, I didn't want to let him down. And, you know, you want your dad to be proud of you and all that stuff. And so that was difficult. But he also could see that it was taking a toll on me. And, you know, we can get into this more as the conversation goes on. But part of my story is that in the course of pastoring, I really had a what you could call, if you're using Christian terms, a dark night of the soul. If you're using secular terms, a crisis of faith, where I really I lost the faith that was once so vibrant. And now in retrospect, I don't really see it so much as losing it, as much as I see it as it was refined and it became something more. But at the time, it felt like losing it entirely. And for a season, I would have, if you caught me in an honest moment, or maybe gave me some truth serum, I would have been I would have confessed myself to be an atheist, because I really lost my faith for all suits and purposes. And, you know, the thing about it was taking it seriously that led me there. It wasn't because, you know, I wanted to go out and, I don't know, live some kind of crazy lifestyle or whatever, you know, the things people typically think, like, oh, if somebody jettisons Christianity, it just means they want to go out and, I don't know, party and cheat on their wife, whatever. I don't know. I'm just throwing stuff out there. It wasn't that at all. It was really, for me, it was a pursuit of, you know, having a genuine heart, being a person of integrity, whatever. And I just was like, man, I can't sign on to certain of these things anymore. I can't say amen to certain of these ideas and truths anymore and keep my integrity intact, because I don't believe that. I don't believe gay people are going to hell. I don't believe, you know, really, it came to the point where I'm like, I don't believe anybody's going to hell. I think that's you know, I think that's mythological. And, you know, and I could even just deconstructing the scriptures themselves, I could be like, you know, really this whole concept doesn't even make sense. It's not even there. So all these things that my faith was built on, and therefore my ministry platform as a pastor was built on, they were all kind of getting just kicked out from under me through questioning and honesty. And it came to a point where I couldn't do it anymore. I couldn't stand in front of people and pretend to believe something that I didn't. You know, that bothers me, because that bothers me. You know, lying in general bothers me, but there's different ways of lying, you know, and it's always a struggle even to explain it now, all these years later, because I wasn't being dishonest.
Right.
I was being as honest as I could, but, you know, you've got people who look up to you in that position. You don't want to hurt them. You don't want your questioning of something to lead to some kind of fall on their end when they might not be ready for what you're ready for, you know? And so it was difficult, you know, it was a difficult place to be in. And I was trying to handle it as carefully as I possibly could handle it. And, you know, you make kind of an exit strategy, because it's my career, you know, I wasn't bivocational. This was what I did for a living. And I've got a mortgage, I've got a car payment, I've got kids, I've got all all the good stuff that comes along with being an adult and some of the not good stuff. And I don't mean the kids when I say that, I mean the mortgage and all that.
Right.
But I've got all that stuff. And Dad loves your kids if you're listening. They're not listening. But I got all that stuff, so that's tough. It's tough. So you make your exit strategy and you plan it. And, my dad, he could see that it was taking a toll on me. And I had several moments where I just wrote, I'm pretty stoic emotionally. I'm a rather stoic individual. I don't really wear my emotions on my sleeve. You might not know it by the way I speak, but I mean, I'm not just like, I don't just go around crying all the time. But,
right.
And I certainly don't do that in front of my dad, but I, at least on 2 occasions, I just lost it because the pressure was so much. And we eventually were just, whatever. We made peace with each other on that level, and also made peace with each other in the sense of like, you know what, I'd rather be your dad than a pastor figure to you, and I'd rather you be my son than anything else. And so let's just agree to disagree agreeably and just be a father and son and a son and a father. So, but it's definitely something I've had to come to terms with over the years. Right. I've had to come to terms with that because I think a big part of the hero's journey, if someone wants to think of it in those terms, or the spiritual journey, I think a big part of that is redeeming in your own eyes the image of your father or of your ancestors, because we all diverge from them at some point, right? There's that point of leaving home, right? There's the point where Frodo leaves the Shire, right? There's the point where whoever the character is leaves whatever the place is they're used to being. And in that leaving, there's a sort of, not necessarily an FU, but there's kind of a, it's time to spread my wings and get the hell out of here and do my own thing and become my own man. And that's necessary. You have to do that. But you can't live always for the rest of your life thinking, yeah, screw you guys. You were holding me back. And now I can really be me because, so part of the spiritual journey, part of completing the circle is making peace and loving what you left for what it was, and loving what you left for what it gave you and what it gifted you. And for me, part of that was seeing my own journey and my father's journey as being one single thing. We move in spirals. We don't necessarily move in circles, but we move in spirals, which means we move in the same motion, but we're never at the same level. You know what I mean? So it's like my dad and I's journey was the same motion, but at different levels. Right. And I think oh God, who's the philosopher? Anyways, I can't remember. Some French philosopher, it'll come to me, said every truly novel thing appears in the form of a repetition. And so for me, my journey, which was sort of revolutionary for me, was really a repetition of my father's, just on a different frequency, right? It's like if you're playing a guitar, whatever if you're playing in a, like chords, you think, G, A, B, C, D, E minor, F sharp, G, if you're playing in C, you think C, D, E, F, whatever. But if like the Nashville number system, it's all just one number that represents the same chord relative to the key you're playing in. And I think our journeys are really more like that. It's always the same thing we're playing, just relative to the key we're in. So my dad and I's journey, I realized, was the same thing relative to the life that we were living. And that's what really helped me redeem my father in my eyes, is by seeing it all as one thing, that I'm doing the same thing. And by leaving, quote unquote, I was actually honoring him more than I would have honored him by staying, because the journey he gave me as an example was a journey where he had to leave the tradition of his youth to pursue what he ended up becoming. And so I had to do the same to become who I was. So I actually honored him by leaving something rather than by staying, because a baby bird honors the egg by breaking the shell, not by staying in it and dying. And anyways, that was a long way of answering that question. I'm sorry.
No, I mean but that's the journey, that's the process. Mm-hmm. And like you said, I mean, especially when you're following in sort of the family footsteps, but you decide, because you were not believing in it anymore. The words you were speaking, you were not believing. So you were being truth to yourself. And I mean, that's life's journey, right? Always do things that make you feel good and not like be something you're not. right?
Yeah.
And that's a very valid point for life in general. Is don't do something because you feel you have to do it.
Yeah.
Do it because you want to be there. You're passionate about it. Just like the three of us sitting here right now, we're very passionate about the journeys we're on right now.
Yeah.
And it all brought us here for a reason. And like I said, it was a perfect way. And a lot of people don't realize how difficult of a conversation that must have been for anybody to have to look at somebody they looked up to and says, you know what, I just don't believe in this. I have to walk away because it's not making me feel good inside right now.
Yeah.
And so I mean, kudos to you, and to be able to have that conversation. And like you said, you already made peace with God on it, and now you had to put the other piece of that puzzle so that you can now go, okay, this is now my journey begins. And we all go through that. I go through that on my journey, Michael John's journey. Like I said, it brings us through a lot of things and conversations we really don't want to have with people,
Mhm.
but you have to be truthful to yourself. So that is a life lesson, just not to be a people pleaser.
Yeah. And one of my favorite illustrations for it, one of my favorite philosophers is Friedrich Nietzsche, and it's in the opening to Thus Spake Zarathustra, which is one of his, I think, his master work. He talks about the parable of the camel, the lion, and the child. And he says that we all begin as a camel in some sense. That is, we all bend the knee and say, put a burden on my back that I can carry. And we think the heavier the burden that we carry, the more noble we are. And we also fancy ourselves as the choosers of the burden that lay on our back, not realizing, well, other people are laying burdens on us because, youthful zeal is great for free labor. And, people don't do it on purpose. It's just like you naturally impress your own passions onto whether it's your child's literally or symbolically. And so we all have these burdens laid on us, and we gladly and gleefully bear them in dromedarian fashion like camels. And we fancy ourselves, better than everyone else for how many burdens we're bearing. And then he says there comes a point, though, where the camel goes into the wilderness and he encounters the dragon called Thou Shalt. And on every scale of this dragon is written another thou shalt not, thou shalt not. And he realizes the supplier of the burdens he was bearing is this dragon, Thou Shalt. And then what forms in the camel is, Nietzsche says, a sacred no. And he learns to roar no in the face of the dragon, Thou Shalt. And it's a sacred no. He learns to stand up for himself and say no to things he used to only be able to say yes to. And he says that's at that point that the camel becomes the lion, right? So the camel is transformed into the lion when it finds its no. But Nietzsche says but the lion is not the final step. The final step of maturity is that of the child, which seems antithetical, but ultimate maturity is becoming a child again, where on the other side of saying no to something you could only say yes to before, you find your sacred yes. And this time you're saying yes because you're choosing. And you could actually go back and say yes to the thing you initially said no to, but now you're saying yes to it on your terms, right? And you've been able to see the truth that you couldn't see before, because before you could only see what was being laid on your back, right? And so the camel, lion, child illustration is, to me, one of the best illustrations of the hero's journey that's out there. The word in German he gives for what you become when you become the child again is that you're a wheel propelled from its own center. That you choose and you create. You're not being chosen for and created. And you have to have that point where we all do, where we're not choosing for ourselves. You have to have that point where you say no, you dismiss, you let go, you leave, and it all breaks down on you. But then there's the point of reconstitution where it comes back together and you find yourself and you find that sacred yes. If that made sense.
Yes.
Well, let me say this. For myself, and I'm speculating with all this stuff you're saying is like, wow, I'm drooling. I'm trying to keep up, man. It's so amazing. I mean, that's confident. It really is. Wow. Hopefully I'm hearing this correct. So for myself, maybe this is some sort of a dark night of the soul journey for me. Going through 20 years and change of a cocaine addiction, in and out of the rehabs and the mental hospitals and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
I'm not making this about me. I'm just comparing.
No, you're good, man.
At one point, eventually, I just had enough.
Yeah.
At one point, I started, eliminating people out of my life that didn't need to be there anymore.
Yeah.
Because they weren't doing me any good. It was like just flushing a toilet, getting rid of stuff and going different routes of doing it to make it happen, to change my life and go forward in a different journey where I wanted to be years ago. And I just got caught up in other nonsense.
Yeah.
But then here we are now doing it. It's like, I think I'm getting it correct. Exactly. Surrender is the key. You say that's enough of this and let's carry on to something better. And this right here, right now, is obviously something better. So I think I had my own little version of the dark night of the soul, however we'd word it. What else did you call it? I was writing this stuff down here so I don't miss. Crisis of faith as well.
Yeah.
Not so much for myself. I can't say I've had a big religious.
Yeah.
Well, okay, wait. So back in the day, there was a book I had access, and there was a time, and I'm going to ask you your thoughts on this too, Jeff. Getting involved in a book about a list of 72 demons, which there was invocation, evocation, conjuring, all those fancy words. But then after a while, I realized, I don't believe that it's that word. I believe it's more of, it's some sort of a being, 1,000,000%. It's a being. It's something out there. But it's not this fire and brimstone and this fear mongering, So now with that being said, what are your thoughts on, now there's, there are people go to exorcisms, and we were actually at one, but I'm not going to say it was a demon or a devil. I don't know what it was. What we saw. It's not green pea soup being spewed out onto the wall. No heads were turning or anything like that.
Yeah.
But I mean, what are your thoughts on what is a demon or a devil? I mean, are we going to the realm of aliens or galactics? What is that?
Yeah, great question. And it is definitely one I wrestle with. Part of growing up in the tradition I grew up in was that demons were everywhere. That was part of it. Was charismatic tradition. So casting out demons, exorcisms, and things like that that was par for the course. And I grew up in a house that's part of the book I'm writing right now. I grew up in a house that was about as active spiritually as any other I've really heard of. And obviously that's judging by my own experiences, but what we experienced over a 13-year period, I'm like, yeah, you can make a movie out of this stuff. And it was to us, though, we had only the filter of Christianity to work with. And so whatever was happening was passing through that membrane before we registered it consciously. And so to us, it was always demonic. And is that just simply because we had these filters that the experienced passed through before it got to us? I'm not sure. But like when I'm looking at you guys right now, when I'm looking at the room that I'm in right now, really, I'm seeing inside of my head, right? I'm seeing this is all happening inside of my head. What I'm seeing is it's being reflected back to me. My brain's processing it. And, but really, it's all being filtered. It's all coming back to me. So, it's possible the wall that I'm looking at isn't really the color brown that I perceive it as being ultimately. It could be the way that my rods and cones interpret that light. There's more going on in this room that I don't see. A mantis shrimp has many more, rods and cones than we do. And so it sees billions of colors, whereas we're only capable of seeing whatever we're capable of seeing. So reality is subject to our filters in some way. And, if quantum physics, things like the double slit experiment, stuff like that teaches us anything, how we perceive and process and observe reality also has an effect on what that reality kind of is and how it behaves towards us anyways. And so, what we experienced growing up, was it really demonic, or was that the way we were interpreting it? That is a great question. One I don't have an ultimate answer for, but when it comes to the demonic, do I think there's evil? Absolutely. Is there human evil? 100%. Is there evil that exists on a spiritual plane? I think 100%. And when you talk about the Goetia, and the 72, all that. You talk about, if you get into like Lurianic Kabbalah, you have the tree of life, the Sephirot, but then under that, you have the Klipot, which are like the roots, the inverse of the Sephirotic tree of life. And so I think the demonic, if it is, you can't have, all light casts a shadow. Let's say it that way. So you can't have light without there being some kind of shadow. So the moment that light comes into existence, and there's a verse in Isaiah where God says, I create light and darkness. But the thing about darkness is that darkness isn't really a thing, unless you're talking about the darkness of deep space that's penetrated with neutrinos and things like that. But that's not what somebody writing, 3,000 years ago was talking about. Darkness is not substantial. Darkness is a lack of substance. It's a lack of photons, not the presence of, antiphotons. So how do you create darkness? You create darkness by creating light, because darkness is all that there is prior to there being anything else. So the moment something else comes to exist, darkness comes to exist as its opposite. So it's non-being. But once being comes to exist, you can now compare being and non-being, right? Once you posit up, well, then there has to be down. But prior to you positing anything directionally speaking, there's neither up nor down. But the moment you point up, well, then there's also the possibility of down. And so I think for goodness and light and love to manifest itself in any way, shape, or form, which is ultimately what I think God is, whatever we want to call it, whatever name we want to pin on its lapel, I think it's love and I think it's light ultimately. So the moment that breaks into reality and manifests itself, you can instantaneously contrast it with anything that is not that. And so whatever this field is that we exist in of creation, there are aberrations that are the inversions of love and light. And so, like I said, even in Kabbalah, there's the tree of life that we all know, Chachma, Bina, Das, Tiferet, all these little, people, anybody who's involved in the alternative spirituality knows the picture of the Sephirot and the tree of life. Well, in Kabbalah, there's also the root system of that tree, which are the Klipot, or like demonic figures. So it's the inversion. So I think whatever the demonic is, it's an inversion of love and light. And I think the demonic is that which fragments rather than that which joins and unites. I think the divine, when it's active and when it's manifesting, always looks like that which brings together the fragments of a person's life, right? And brings you into wholeness and unity. The demonic is that which shatters and then scatters so that you can't reconstitute and find yourself. And there is a necessary shattering that happens at times. But when it's the divine, it's redemptive. There's kind of a pulling apart of aspects so you can see other things, but it's not a breaking. The demonic is a shattering, and then it spreads you so far apart that you can't find yourself or reconstitute. And I think that's one reason why, and it's interesting, again, just using mystical Christian terms, God is Trinity, a multiplicity who speaks as a unity, whereas the demonic is always, when it's speaking to the mouth of a singular person, always identifies itself as a multiplicity. So the triune God, who's three persons, says, I'm one, whereas a person who is afflicted by the demonic, in scripture at least, usually says, we are many. And there's the famous legion for we are many, right? So it's like that shattering of the soul symbolically, and it becomes so spread out that the person can't find who they are anymore. And there's all these bits and pieces, trauma here, trauma there. I think it can be as simple as that, trauma that shatters the soul and creates even these complexes within an individual that are almost separate entities in their own right. And anyways, I could talk on and on about all this. I don't mean to take up too much time with it, but
I want to comment real quick here. Sorry, Dale. I want to comment real quick. So you're mentioning about your house, and clearly haunting, if you will. And I say this to people, based on my own experiences. When we get scared, terrified, the like, does not necessarily mean it is malevolent. Does not necessarily mean that it's bad. I believe it's because of what's going on around us, whether it's that drastic temperature drop, the feeling of the static in the air. I could go on and on with that stuff. We're not used to it. It's not familiar.
Yeah.
It's so different. And that's what's terrifying. That's what makes you, fight or flight kind of thing in a lot of cases, right?
100%. Yeah.
That's what scares you. It doesn't mean it's bad. It's just you're not used to it.
Exactly. Yeah, no. And then especially because I think anomalous phenomena are, I always say it's a mirror or it's a projection screen. And it comes into our lives as a projectile, like it comes into from the outside, right? It doesn't it's not a projection that starts here and goes out. It's something that comes into our lives as a projection, whether it's something of an extraterrestrial nature, cryptozoological, paranormal, or Christological in terms of religion. It kind of seems to enter in from the outside. It arises in our lives and it's a projectile. But then we project onto the projectile the contents of our own, inner being. And the projectile becomes a projector that sends back to us what's going on in us. And so if you encounter something supernatural, like you said, and let's say there's a temperature drop or, messes with the electricity or whatever, you project fear onto that because, in the moment, hey, we're here because our ancestors mistook breezes in the bush of the African savanna for lions rather than assuming it was a breeze. Those who assumed it was a breeze eventually got mauled. Those who assumed this might be a tiger, probably more often than not, it was a breeze, but they passed their genes on. And so our brains are pattern recognizing machines. And we tend to project threat onto things because it's how you survive. And so you wake up at 3 a.m. and you get shivers down your spine. You look at the clock. It's a weird number that you saw in a horror movie. And there might be nothing going on at all. Right.
Right.
But instantly you're like, boom, you project onto this, whatever it is you have in here. And you can almost create stuff like that in some way. I think you can project something to being. And, but then some of it is, actually real, entering into your realm of experience, and you can project onto it fear. And I think you could also project onto it the opposite. And sometimes I think, even in Christian terms, and I embrace that, my dog's going nuts in the background. Sorry guys. But, I totally embrace that. A lot of that stuff, but like you come at this all aggressively and you're trying to provoke it with, an image of the cross or saying the name of Jesus or the blood of Jesus or something. And you're using these, provocations. That's totally fine. And that might be totally appropriate in certain settings and certain traditions. If that's the way someone wants to roll, that's totally cool with me. But you're projecting fear and angst and anger onto it. And so it's going to come back to you that way. I mean, I performed deliverances and exorcisms numerous times in my years as a pastor. I remember there was this one young girl, her mom brought her to me, and there was all these papers where she had literally written contracts trying to sell her soul to a demon. And they were covered in her blood, where she had cut herself with glass on these pieces of paper. And this was a very troubled young woman. There was more going on than just that. There was very bad things going on at home that I knew about, that I was obligated to do my duty concerning these things. I knew there were things going on. And, so there's a part of me that's like, is this not just, are you seeking attention, but like, is this just a cry for help? I don't know. But there were moments when this young woman manifested in a way where she was behaving like a serpent, writhing on the floor, hissing, flicking her tongue, and it was like, the more aggressive I would be in my attempts at this thing leaving, the more aggressive she would become. It was like, it wasn't, my aggression was being met with aggression. But when I would just be at peace, it would also do the same thing. And it was like, the energy was like just ping ponging back and forth off of each other. And so, I think you get what you project onto the projectile back, and a lot of times that can be the thing for me. Like every paranormal experience I've ever had has been a glimpse into my own soul. It's shown me what's happening. Even the story that I always tell at the UFO convention every year is one where I saw my internal spiritual journey play out outside of me in the form of phenomenon. And whether that was like actually intended to sync up somehow, or I was just projecting onto it what was happening in here, didn't matter, because it gave me an external glimpse into my internal world, and it's ultimately what helped me move past certain things. So yeah, anyways.
No, I mean that. I mean what you just talked about. I mean that's been a topic amongst a lot of paranormal people, and how people can project their thoughts and everything into something. For example, everybody knows the story of the Dibby box and how it's encased in wax and it's supposed to contain the soul of a demon. You know, and it's like somebody tells a story,
Yeah.
and then somebody picks up on that story because they're deathly afraid of demons. They now truly believe there's a demon in here. You are now putting your energy into that object as well, and it goes and goes and goes. And this is what I believe creates a lot of hauntings as well. It's not that the place itself is haunted. It does have spiritual activity, but what people tell each other and that story keeps continuing, that people will eventually believe, like, oh, do not go in that house because it's full of demons.
Right.
Well, you go in there and the first thing that happens to you, you get a little scratch or you feel winded. You're like, oh my God, I'm being possessed by demons. But it's internally, it's your own fears that are creating this image and this projection when it's truly not as bad as what it would seem to be. So I love that you brought that up, and how our projections and how we perceive things, then put it back out there again, is how we truly feel when we just stop and think about it for a second. That, like, think about it, come to a conclusion, and don't believe in the first thing that somebody tells you about it.
Yeah.
Like, do your own feeling and see how you feel about it.
Yeah.
I'm like Michael John. I don't believe anything's demonic. I believe everything is a negative energy. I mean, if there's good energy, there has to be bad energy, because that's just the yin yang of the world.
Yeah. And like I said, if there's light casts a shadow. Like, so the ultimate reality to me, the ultimate ground of being is love, is light. That's what the divine ultimately is. This loving, creative mind, force, whatever one wants to call it. But for that to manifest itself is for the opposite of it to become apparent. Because like I said, if you're in a pitch black room, I mean, totally pitch black, no light getting in, all you're perceiving is darkness. That's it. This is just the state of things. Nothing is causing this. This is just the state of things because, well, it's nothing. But if you turn a light on, it doesn't illuminate every shadow in the room. You're still going to see shadows in the corner. It's going to be a little lighter here than it is there. There's going to be a slight gradation to things because light creates shadow. You can now see something you could not previously see because light has manifested itself. So whatever goodness and love is, for it to manifest itself, is for it to risk shadow becoming visible as well. That is to say, it is to risk individuals being able to see what love is and say, I choose to feel and manifest and enact the opposite of that, right? It creates the potential for aberration just simply by poking its head up and making its presence known.
So I got to ask, let's move from this now. You are on KGRA Digital, along with Andrea Perron. You're a co-host on Soul Schools. I don't know how to say that. Sojourn?
Yeah, Soul School Sojourn. Yes. Yep.
Thank you for saved me there. How did you meet Andrea? I want to know that. How did you meet?
Yeah. Great question. And that's I think it's kind of cool story. It's part of the book I'm writing right now is a little bit about how we connected, because like I said, I grew up in this house that was haunted. I grew up, it was so real. Like, it was so real to me. there was just no question that this stuff was real. I lived with it every day. Every member of my family lived with it every day. And we may not have talked about it around the dinner table, but we all knew everybody was experiencing it. And as I'm writing my book right now and talking to everybody, we're actually just like, Jesus, why did we never talk about this? And we're all like, well, because it was pretty darn scary. But, we lived in that world. It was so real to us. And, so when I became an atheist for all intents and purposes, and I kind of became, almost a pure materialist in my way of looking at things, I have to say part of it was therapeutic because it allowed me to no longer fear the demonic that I feared growing up. Part of it, there was a therapeutic aspect of it there. And I don't write of this in my last book, Dale, that you're reading right now, The Atheistic Theist, because I wasn't quite ready to share this part of it yet. I was still working through the implications of all of this. But the funny thing was, so what did The Conjuring came out about a decade ago, maybe, and some change. And I was returning from a speaking trip to Colorado, and it was right at the end of pastoring. I had either resigned or I was getting ready to. I can't remember. It was right around there. And a friend of mine was like, hey, let's go see The Conjuring. And I was like, all right, that sounds fun. It sounds actually like a lot of fun. So we went and we saw The Conjuring. And I've watched a lot of horror movies. I enjoy I'm not necessarily like a slasher horror movie guy, but I love a good ghost story. I love a good haunting movie. The Poltergeist. Poltergeist is one of my favorites of all time. The Entity, some of those good old ones.
Ooh, that's a good one.
It's like a underrated one too.
Yeah.
The fact that you never really see it, it's so good. But this just zinged me in all the wrong / right places. It was like where the dentist blows the air in your teeth and you're like, that's where it's at. It was like, it was just like, oh, there was something about the setting of the movie, something about the way that it just, certain nights things would just pop, and then it would be normal, and then it would be happy, and then it would be sunny, and then one night it would pop again. It was the most real depiction of what we experienced, minus some of the more fantastical Hollywood elements that I had ever seen. And it awakened, it was like, a sitar has, like the sitar, the Indian instrument, you hear in the later Beatles music, you hear those higher strings, but then you hear those droning lower ones like that. Wow. A sitar has sympathetic strings, which if you hit a string that's in one note, the sympathetic strings that are tuned to that same note will begin to vibrate and resonate sympathetically just by you plucking the other one. And it's like when you're in the presence of something you've experienced, you begin to like vibrate sympathetically. Watching that movie, my sympathetic strings in my soul were going off. And I was like, it began to reawaken spirituality inside of me as a slightly recovering atheist. No offense to my atheist friends, but I just, by saying recovering, but like it awakened something in me. And it was really one of the things that turned things around for me, where I started to re-explore spirituality. And it was a bizarre way of it happening, but I began to remember the things that happened to me when I was a kid. And it was because of that. And it was so odd and serendipitous that over COVID, Andrea and I just sent an email to her one day and was like, hey, I'd love to have a conversation with you someday because your story deeply resonates with me. And I never expected a response. She's Andrea Perron. I didn't even really know what a big deal she was then. I just knew she was a big deal, but I was like, I just at the very least want to say thank you for making your family story known, because some people like me would have never had the bravery to really embrace the fact that they have a similar one. And, so I didn't hear back, and I wasn't surprised. I didn't really expect to. And about a week or so later, I get this email back from this weird email address, Bathsheba something or another. And I'm like, oh, that's Andrea Perron. I was like, holy crap. And she was like, sir, I don't read my emails. Like, she's like, I can't. There's so many of them. She's like, but I saw yours and I felt something and I had to read it. And we went on to like have this big conversation. She ended up coming on my podcast, and we just became very, very good and close friends. It was really bizarre, something I never saw happening. She invites me to the Michigan UFO contact event. We meet in person there. We've met and talked several times. She'd had me on her show several times after that as well. And, at dinner after the first, it was 2020 or 2021. I can't remember. She was like, you want to start a show with me? And I was like, Yeah, I don't have to really think about that one. I was like, yep, I got it. Tell me when it is, and I'll be there. And the rest is kind of history. And now we're like best buds. It's really bizarre, but it's one of those things too of just how your journey it connects. It's so bizarre. Like, yeah, there was some effort put into it. Yeah, an email was sent. Sure,
Right.
But I mean, how many emails are sent, right? I mean, it just doesn't always happen that way. And for some reason, it just did. There was no incentive. I wasn't like, hey, I'll give you $1 million if you email me. It was just a random email thrown out there into the void from a guy who I think was using his old handle of like Pastor Jeff Turner at gmail.com or something too. So not exactly one Bathsheba at whatever would answer, but it's so bizarre. But that's the way the spiritual journey is just marked by those synchronicities and those signs that just help you stay on the path. And it's how look, yeah, there are coincidences. Coincidences happen too, sure. But man, sometimes they're just so on the nose. It's like you're almost being a bit too obvious with this God universe, but it's like, that's how you're on the path. And
Amazing. Good story.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, for those that do know Andrea, just knows how much of an absolute sweetheart she is.
Oh, she's amazing.
And I know we're all praying for her right now to get through what she's going through.
Yes.
And I mean, if there's anybody in this world that will find a way to kick cancer's ass, it will be Andrea.
Yep.
And I mean, I know the conversation I had with her. I'll tell you, after getting off the phone with her after an hour, it was like a pep talk, and I felt like, yeah, I think this disease found the wrong person to mess with. So
yeah,
for those out there watching and out there, please always keep Andrea in your prayers, and of course Shaylee Class, somebody else who we're advocating for, who is dealing with bone cancer at the age of 13. And Tim Reha, and also Chris Fleming. So, I mean, we know lots of people who are out there, but like I said, Andrea is such a sweetheart. I met her back at the Michigan Paracon about 10 years ago. And I'll tell you, when you meet her for the first time, and I just watched The Conjuring, and I was just going up to say hi, and how much I was like, so thinking like, wow, how can a family go through her story and her be able to talk about it is just courage in itself. But yeah, it's just something clicked and we vibed, and it was just that special bond, from the moment you meet somebody that they're meant to be in your life.
Yep.
And she is definitely one of those people. And just like meeting you this year at the UFO Contact Convention, like I was told Michael John in the beginning, it's like I've been watching you with Andrea for a few years now, and I love the way you guys connect. You guys have such a vibe. You guys don't even have to really talk. You know what each other's thinking, and that's amazing. And here you were. We got to meet you, and like I told you, it was like after about 5 minutes of talk to you, it felt like I've known you for a very long time. And it's a good feeling. And you're with the right people.
Yeah. Yeah, I felt the same way. Yep.
Jeff, I'm sorry I didn't mention Soul Sojourn, KGRA Digital. When?
Yes. Friday nights, 9 to 10 p.m. And I'll also be on this week with her for her show, A World Awakening, for the 10 to 11 o'clock hour as well. So in the 10 to 11, we're going to be talking about actually our own histories growing up in the paranormal, the experiences we had. And
good
so
we'll
we'll kind of see where that goes. But that's kind of the theme for the second show. First show, I don't remember the topic, but it's going to be good.
I want to show real quick here. We were mentioning at the beginning of the hour how we met. When at the UFO Contact, when I was doing my talk, you were back there drawing away and you didn't know why. I'm going to, if I can I'm going to put on its side. I can barely see because I have my phone, but Anyways, what's interesting, it's all very interesting, this drawing, but this guy right here, and I'm not wearing it right now.
Yeah.
It's a necklace and you have a tattoo of it, and Dale has a tattoo of it.
Yeah.
Exact symbol.
Yeah, that was one of those moments of like I said, like the sympathetic strings go off, you know, like when you were talking, and I don't know why, because I'd never met you before.
Right.
You know, I didn't know you from Adam, you know, but when you were talking, and it didn't happen for anybody else, I just started seeing the symbolism of 3, and I just started drawing it out in different ways. And I don't know. It just kind of like, I just do that sometimes. But I specifically put the triquetra on there, the Trinity symbol or whatever. And then when I met you that night, there was a part of your story, which we don't have time to get into, but there was a part of an experience you had that matched the 3 symbolism. You know, part of the dream you had and the experiences you had that really matched that symbolism. And in my mind, the way that I kind of symbolically break things down represented that hero's journey, the camel, lion, and child, the whole thing of like, you're one thing, there's the breakdown, then there's the reconstitution. Like it mapped over that really perfectly, and how I process things. And that was kind of coming out in what I was drawing. And then when I met you that night around the bar area, and I saw, I can't remember, I think you were like, hey, and then I was like, hey, because I've got the tattoo, and then you had it too. And it was just like this, wow, we all started like vibrating in the same key. And it was just, it was really cool. Like you said, when there's something about meeting like your people, you know, and I think everybody's our people on some level, but not everybody's our people, you know, like when you're on the same wavelength, and we probably all come from wildly different backgrounds to some degree, but it doesn't matter. You're of the same stuff somehow. And when you're in the presence of people like that, you just feel it. You just know it. And that was just one of those moments, man. It was cool. It was awesome.
It was nuts.
Absolutely. And I mean, like I said, me and Michael John, we've been doing this show for just over 3 years now. And every time we are at an event and we get to meet people, there's just certain people that you don't know for any rhyme or reason, but they seem to stand out more than others. And you just kind of, and I'm always a believer that people don't come into your life by accident. The people are there for a reason. And that's the one thing I do like about Deb and RJ and Mike's event, the UFO Contact Convention, is that truly a lot of amazing people go there, they attend, and I mean, each and every year, I see a good majority of people who attend these things for the first time, and they walk out of there. You see how much of a difference they are come Sunday when they're leaving, and how different they are because they finally found a place they can be open, a place they can be themselves, and they can approach anybody who is there and talk about their story, and everybody is welcoming and embraces them. And I think that's truly amazing.
It is. Yeah. To feel seen and to feel that what is seen about you is great, you know, let alone, you know, just acceptable.
Right.
For one, people don't usually get that in life, man. People rarely get that in life. Like if your average person is starving for like the smallest bit of encouragement, like literally dying for like an encouraging word or two. Your average person never gets that, you know? And, you know, and then they have their whole history. They either feel ashamed of, or like they have to hide, especially if you're someone who's had more, you know, stranger experiences. And to walk into a room filled with people who have either one, had them, two, want them, or three, you know, thinks it's like the coolest thing ever. I mean, that's transformational. Yeah. It's transformational to be seen like that. Like I said, even in like the realm of quantum physics, to be observed in a certain way, you know, a light, it behaves as either a wave pattern or, you know, another, depending on how it's being observed, you and I, we behave and we come alive and we transformed also based on how we're observed. And if we're observed with suspicion and people looking down their nose at us and how silly, how ridiculous, well, we clam up and we become less and less and less. But you walk in a room full of people that see you for who you are. And even if they don't know your story fully, you're cool in their eyes. You just, you leave walking with your shoulders back. You leave like I know every time I go to that, and I'm pretty open about who I am in life, but when I go to an event like that and everybody is just like in the same key, I just leave feeling like $1 million. I just leave. I leave feeling like, geez, I feel like I just got like saved or something. Like, I'm like, whoa, what?
Well said.
Yeah, no, definitely well said at all. I want to give you a moment to plug your book. I just started reading it. I am truly fascinated with this. I love that it's out there. So please, give a brief description of what your book's about, and for those where people can purchase it.
Yes. Okay. The book you're speaking of, it's called The Atheistic Theist. The subtitle being Why There Is No God and You Should Follow Him. And so it's basically the story of my own theological unraveling as the kind of radical pastor I spoke to you about me being, and then kind of the reconstitution of some of those beliefs, kind of how certain things fell apart, how they came back together, what they came back together as. And so that whole story is in there. The kind of whole theological paradigm itself is in there. And it's really meant to be a kind of coincidence or coincidence of opposites. The title, The Atheistic Theist, obviously, that doesn't really go together, but Why There Is No God and You Should Follow Him. The whole thing's meant to kind of be this melding together of opposites, the coincidentia oppositorum, as the alchemists called it. And it's really the story of how I went from being a believer's believer to an unbeliever to something like a believer that I don't exactly know how to talk about anymore, but to say I'm an atheistic theist. I don't believe in God, and yet I believe in God. And how does that work? Well, you'll have to read the book to find out, and you might still not find out. But and then I'm working on another one right now that's kind of a sequel to it, but not really. That's going to be called A Sacred Yes, based on the parable of the camel, lion, child that I talked about from Nietzsche. That's going to also weave in the story of the kind of paranormal history and how that also brought things brought things together. And I do have another book out there as well. If you look me up, it's called Saints in the Arms of a Happy God, which is intended to be a riff off of Jonathan Edwards' Sinners in the Hands of an Angry God. And that's like a 450-page theological tome. So if you feel like tackling that one, you can. If not, I'd recommend the other one if you want something more up to date with where I'm at right now. But those are out there. And
So you can't find the book on Amazon, or you can. Do you have the books with you when you're at events?
I do. Yes, I do.
Okay. And just before we let you go here, where are you going to be talking next, or where people be able to find you besides Friday nights on KGRA?
Funnily enough, my calendar is actually pretty barren at the moment. I haven't really been actively scheduling too much, and that's kind of been since COVID. I do things sporadically. At the moment, I don't have anything for the remainder of 2024 on the calendar, and 2025 I'm going to start getting stuff back up there. But I've kind of been taking a little bit of a breather and focusing more on writing and working on the podcast and stuff like that. In 2025, we're gonna hit the ground running, and I'll be posting some stuff about that. But if you want to connect with me and find out where I'll be, probably Facebook is one of the best places to find me, which dates me a little bit, but that's fine. If you look up Jeff Turner on Facebook, my mug will pop up. That's me. I haven't been as active the last couple of months really either, because I've been taking a little bit of a break. But we're getting ready to launch some stuff here in the next couple of weeks. Season 2 of my podcast, Religionless, a new podcast that's going to be paranormal themed and but also philosophically and theologically themed as well, but around paranormal events. That's going to be called The Liminalists, kind of a riff off of the Minimalists podcast. And I'm going to be doing that with a friend of mine named Aaron Tomlinson. who's a mental health professional and a former pastor as well. So we've got a bunch of stuff that's getting ready to launch, and I'm really excited about it. So find me on all the socials, and yeah, it's going to be good.
Well,
Absolutely.
Jeff Turner, I want to say thank you so much. The hour passes by so quick. I can't complain, man.
Yes.
We've been really blessed for every time we've had great. Every guest has been great, for sure. You are no different. We just sit here. It's like we're hanging out by a campfire, hanging out, roast some marshmallows with some friends, just talking what we love to talk about, and it fills my soul, man. I'll say it like that, for sure. Thank you so much to everybody for tuning in. The TPV Nation, the creeps, the freaks, the weirdos. We can't do it from day one to day now. We can't do it without all of you. This is what we get to do, what we love doing this right here. I'm going to say we'll see you all on the other side. When's our next interview, Dale? Coming up is story.
Our next interview will be coming up this Saturday. We got a special treat. Three lovely ladies, two of which we had the opportunity to spend the time with up in Thunder Bay, Ontario. We are going to be interviewing Canada's own Beyond the Hauntings, also stars of T&E, History's Most Haunted. Like I said, we got to hang out with these two of the lovely ladies, Corinne and Leanne, the two sisters. We're going to be talking with them this Saturday night at 8 p.m. Our regular time is at 8 p.m. So we hope you'll tune in to watch that show and talk a little bit about being Canadian reality TV stars in the paranormal, which, you know, a lot of us Canadians are not used to because we're all saturated by American television and the American stars, which we love. We love each and every one of them. But yeah, so that is this Saturday, 8 p.m. Eastern, right here on our YouTube channel. Also on our Instagram channel, you'll be able to watch it all live. So yeah, thank you once again, everybody. Jeff, before you do go, I want to say a huge thank you to you. It's been such a great opportunity to be able to talk with you, get to know you. Like I said, I look forward to hanging out and talking with you more down the road for sure.
Yes. Hey, and the honor was all mine, guys. Thank you so much. Really appreciated it. Been edified by the conversation, and I look forward to hopefully doing it again. So
definitely something to look forward to off the road. We will make it happen. In the meantime, and in between time, happy hauntings.
Happy hauntings. If I can find my way out. I'm new to this.